to Japan that comes from within. It isn't a plot. But increasingly, when it comes to having babies, Japanese women just say no. So for all its prosperity and economic might, Japan's population growth seems about to shift into reverse, threatening both the present and future generations.
Why is this happening? Well, for women, Japan is the land that time forgot. The women's movement that has affected many Western nations is clashing with Japanese cultural traditions. The society may be modern and high-tech, but as Lynn Scher reports, Japanese attitudes about women still have a long way to go.
Japanese women's image is being a good wife and mother.
The image is rooted in tradition. Marry, have children, stay home and take care of them. But listen to the voice of a modern Japanese woman.
That's my parents' generation, but I don't want that to happen to me.
Today, Japanese women enjoy far more options than their mothers ever imagined. So they are marrying later and producing fewer babies. So few that if the trend continues, the population of this densely packed country will soon shrink.
You wouldn't know it to walk around Tokyo, but the declining birth rate is a national crisis that threatens to derail the booming Japanese economy. The government here admits it is a critical situation and is trying to warn Japanese citizens they are running out of time.
The pitch is simple: have more babies. The approach is subtle. This TV commercial suggests life's little tragedies are simply more bearable with lots of brothers and sisters. The government considers the problem so serious, they're offering women a new baby bonus. They call it a child allowance. 5,000 yen, or $38 a month for the first child, even more for a second or third. Total over 3 years, just over $1,300. The lure is even higher in one Tokyo suburb. $6,700 for women bearing a third baby. Akihiko Kumashiro is the government's senior policy advisor on the population crisis. He is clearly uncomfortable with the publicity over the issue.
Why the baby bonus?
We don't think it's a baby bonus, but we are not especially aiming at for them to have more children, but
But you'd like it if they would.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a touchy issue because the last time the Japanese government encouraged a baby boom was during World War II, when they handed out prizes for fertility. This 1941 Tokyo newspaper reports women who bear 5 or more children will enjoy financial rewards from the government.
They thought they could acquire more territories outside Japan, so they suddenly began to encourage have more children. So, to my eyes, it's a very stupid choice.
Still, it worked. In 1941, Tokyo maternity wards were full to capacity and brimming with babies. The average Japanese woman bore 5 children. 50 years later, when we visited this Tokyo maternity ward, almost all the bassinets for newborns were empty. The fertility rate here has plummeted to 1.5, way below the 2.1 babies couples must have to replace themselves and stabilize the population. That means a severe reduction, soon, in Japan's 123 million people. Already, its population is aging faster than that of any country in the world. By 1997, there will be more people over 65 than under 15. And with the pool of young workers about to fall off by some 50,000 a year, Japan faces a stunning labor shortage. And that could lead to their worst fear.
Minus growth. Dramatic minus growth.
Negative economic growth could be disastrous for Japan.
Could be disastrous to Japan. I think so.
The main reason Japan is in this predicament is that women are marrying later. Their explanation? Traditional Japanese marriage is viewed as a burden. Psychologist Kiyomi Kawano prepares counselors in Tokyo to deal with women's issues. She gave us some startling insight into how Japanese women feel about their husbands.
It's good for husband to be away and healthy. That's what Japanese wife desire. So they don't want to have husband around anyway.
Why not?
There's no conversation, as I said, there's no communication, yet husband demand to take care of him around. I need newspapers. I want to just sleep. And if you want to go out, make my lunch. Things like this. So it's very troublesome when wife has a husband around.
There are other reasons women say they are having fewer babies. The high cost of living in Japan's overcrowded cities, limited access to daycare for working mothers, and the housing shortage. Local residents have taken to comparing living conditions to
Rabbit hut.
A rabbit hut, yes.
It's that small and that cramped.
Yes, and between the houses there's no space. So when you open the doors, you see the next houses inside.
The Suzuki family lives in a typically tiny apartment with a sliver of a living room barely wide enough for a table. While 3-year-old Likako is clearly the adored baby of this household, she is the last one they'll have. Her mother, Megumi, just doesn't know where she'd put another one. Like every other Japanese mother, Megumi is responsible for all the domestic chores and all the child care. And because she has so much work at home, she can't even consider a full-time career. She once dreamed of becoming a nurse, but now at 27 works several hours a day at a tanning parlor in the Tokyo suburbs.
The government would like to give you 5,000 yen a month to have another child. Is that something you would consider doing?
You must be joking.
Why is that a joke?
5,000 yen a month doesn't come close to the cost of raising a child. Nobody will bear a child because of that money. It's nonsense. Bunch of nonsense.
Megumi's children spend all day at a nursery school. When she left work to collect them at 4 p.m., I went along. This is a typical commute made by mothers all over Tokyo. It is their responsibility to push the children to excel, to pick up children from one school and deliver them to the next. For Megumi, that means hustling her 5-year-old off to more classes in the early evening, standard procedure in this highly competitive society. That is not only traditional women's work, it's pragmatic, since most husbands are simply not around.
What time does your husband normally come home?
10 or 11 would be the early time, and the late would be 2 or 3 in the morning.
Every night of the week?
Yes, most of the week.
What does he do so late?
He's a businessman and spends a lot of time with his clients, mainly entertaining them in the evenings.
Entertainment in Japan is linked closely to success, and many affluent businessmen spend their evenings in costly hostess bars with clients, not home with their wives. The less fortunate put in their late-night hours at the desk, a nationwide ritual we witnessed when our camera peeked into this downtown office building, still active at 10 p.m.
I don't think men are consciously neglecting the family. It just so happens that the other community overwhelms.
The workplace.
The workplace overwhelms his life.
Dr. Yoriko Meguro chairs the sociology department at Tokyo's Sophia University. She told us the workplace is far different for women. While some 40% of the labor force here is female, many in office work are still called on to serve tea, and most are expected to leave once married.
Women workers hold different positions from men, and they are on different career lines.
Not as well paid?
No.
Not as highly thought of?
Unconsciously not highly thought of.
Not quickly promoted?
That's right.
It must be horribly frustrating.
It is. It is.
In other words, the perception of women at work, like these elevator hostesses who greet shoppers, is as inflexible and confining as that at home.
Do you think a man's attitude towards a woman changes once they're married?
It's my opinion that Japanese men, once they get married, consider their wives not as women.
If she's not a woman, what is she?
A wife and a mother, a housekeeper.
You can still find some Japanese women who gladly accept the role that has been sanctioned by so much time. But many others are refusing to settle for the life of either housewives or second-class employees, instead escaping to a less rigid style of life. They are a new breed, this new generation, more like young American feminists of the 70s than descendants of this ancient and formal culture. And when you see them in discos or talk to them, you realize they are simply not dependent on men. I spoke with some surprisingly outspoken young women who insist, to the horror of the government, they do not want to marry before the age of 30. Kyoko Hiranabe, 23, works at a bank.
If I get married, I think I'll have less freedom. Now I do. So,
What do you mean by less freedom?
if I get married, I think I have many things to do, maybe in the kitchen or take care of children. And I still want to go out, go to school at night. And still, lots of guys don't like their wives to go out at night.
Ayako Yoshioka, 23, is a graduate student. She finds the stubborn behavior of Japanese husbands both irritating and amusing.
Well, I consider my dad very spoiled. And I think lots of Japanese men are spoiled.
Ayako, does your father ever do the dishes?
Never. He doesn't even take a soy sauce, which is over there, you know. I mean, my mom's sitting up here and say, soy sauce. And my mom has to, like, you know, stand up, pick it up, and bring it here, you know. And I'm sitting here and say, Dad, you're closer to the soy sauce than my mom. And she goes, soy sauce, the second time, you know. You know, she doesn't say anything and stands up and take it. I don't do the same thing after 5 years. Excuse me, but no.
The real issue, of course, is progress. After decades of enjoying more freedom, better education, and the highest standard of living this country has ever provided, many Japanese women are simply not willing to give it all up. And now that the country is in such trouble, they are saying, don't ask us to change our behavior, change the system.
You have to talk. You have to listen to more women. I'd like to say to government people, they don't listen to. They don't like to listen, and they are not good at listening to women.
But the population crisis may have left them no choice. After all, Japan's predicament, so critical it now desperately needs the help of women, is largely the result of the way the culture treated women for so long. Some officials warn society must change. Quickly.
How much time do you have?
It's my private opinion, but maybe about 10 years.
If baby bonuses aren't the answer, what's the answer?
The answer does not come from any policy making. No one can tell any women to bear more children. It's entirely up to women to decide.
Some of this is quite familiar, Lynn.
Oh, yes.
What kinds of things are the Japanese trying to do to change the system, the situation, besides what we saw?
Barbara, somebody in the government seems to have figured out that baby bonuses may not be the most diplomatic solution to the problem. So they're coming up with what I would call a kinder, gentler approach. They're talking about a one-year maternity or parental leave. They're talking about larger apartments to make it easier to stay at home. They're extending daycare hours to 10 o'clock at night, and they're even promoting leisure time, urging businesses to close at least one day a week so that fathers can spend more time with the family.
But all of that takes time, and if they need a labor force for the short term, what do they do?
Well, they are probably going to have to import foreign workers for the economic problem. And this is something that traditionally the Japanese have not been eager to do. So we're just going to have to see how that works out.
It could change the whole society.
It certainly could, and that's what they're afraid of.
I found this very interesting.
I thought you would.
Well, later, cars. Which of the 91 models are the most trouble-free? John Stossel has some answers. But next, serial murderer is better summer reading than a good murder mystery. How about a murder mystery about a serial killer, one that becomes a movie, maybe? The kind that makes you wonder, how can anybody who isn't a killer write so knowingly about how a killer thinks and acts. Well, Ann Rule is not a murderer. The only list she's been on is the bestseller. But as Bob Brown reports, an eerie touch of fate, plus talent and hard work, have put Ann Rule at the top of her field.
Ann Rule begins the day by taking her dog Holly for a walk along the shore of Seattle's Puget Sound. She lives surrounded by the beauty of nature, but she works by studying the ugliest corners of the human psyche. Like her fictional counterpart, Jessica Fletcher, on Murder, She Wrote, Ann Rule is a best-selling crime writer who sometimes gets involved in the subjects she writes about. But Rule writes about real-life killers. People who, she says, are addicted to murder.
You know, I do think, what is a woman who 15 years ago was a brownie mother every Tuesday afternoon discussing serial murder? And there are times when I think, what am I doing here? But I think I was meant to do what I'm doing.
Her success bears that out. She's currently making the talk show circuit for her latest book, If You Really Loved Me, about a man who coerced his daughter into murdering his wife. She also wrote Small Sacrifices, which became a blockbuster miniseries about a mother who shot her own children to win the attention of a man who didn't like kids. The criminal mind has been a lifelong subject of fascination for Ann Rule, from the time she spent her summers as a child with her grandparents in Michigan. Her grandfather was a county sheriff.
And it's a mom and pop jail. And I was allowed to pass the food to the prisoners through the pantry, and even to visit with the female prisoners. I remember a murderess taught me how to crochet. And I was fascinated with two things. One was, how could my grandpa take a button or a hair or a drop of blood and trace that back to a suspect? And then later was, why would a nice little child grow up to be a criminal? And today those things still fascinate me. However, now I know the proper names. One is forensic science, and the other is the psychopathology of the criminal mind.
Rule has written 7 books and 1,400 articles about real-life crimes and criminals. Once she picks an interesting case, she spends months or even years following the police investigation before writing a word.
You know, this place, I hate to say it, has not changed.
And this is where Ann Rule has found the raw material for most of her stories.
It's good to see you.
How you doing, kid?
Pretty good.
The homicide unit of the Seattle Police Department.
Is Ed there still?
For 14 years, detectives here have watched Rule poring over thousands of case files. Then, when she finds one she likes, she goes to court.
All right, please. This court is now in session. The Honorable Antwi presiding.
Good morning. Please be seated.
Today, she's taking notes on the retrial of Eduardo Peralta, accused of murdering his wife and then dumping her body in a swamp.
Please step up here.
His first trial ended in a hung jury. Rule is saving it for a future magazine article.
It's like a play. All the characters are moving across the stage, and I see what they look like, and I hear what they sound like.
Writing was Ann Rule's second choice as a career. She first became a policewoman on the Seattle force, but was released because she was too nearsighted. She desperately needed to make money to support her 4 young children after a divorce. So she combined her 2 college majors, creative writing and criminology. And she got a job, sort of.
When I started writing for True Detective, they said, we like your work, but our readers will not believe that a female knows anything about police work or investigation, so you're going to have to pick a male pen name. And so that was when I was Andy Stack, a male, 2-fisted, heavy drinking persona. I was turning out over 2 stories a week, 5,000 words a story. So that's 10,000 words. That's 40 pages of finished copy week in and week out for 14 years.
And every 8 weeks you'd finish the equivalent of a novel.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful training ground. A lot of writers will say, well, I have to wait till I'm in the mood to write, or have to wait till the muse hits me. Well, there's nothing like having those little kids needing food the next week to put you in the mood to write. And so it really worked out best for me that I had to.
Over the years, Rule has studied and written about 3 categories of murder: murder within families, female killers, and serial killers.
And then the victim has the...
Today, she gives seminars on all 3 topics. But when she gets to the last, serial killers, she speaks from her own experience.
I worked with Ted Bundy at the crisis clinic in Seattle for a year in the early 70s, 2 nights a week, all night long.
Ted Bundy is the serial killer who captured the attention of America in the late 70s. He is thought to have murdered at least 36 women in 5 states, all of them young, usually with long, dark hair parted in the middle. The term serial killer, the killing of strangers over a long period of time, chosen by a particular physical type, hadn't even been coined yet. And Bundy seemed just too charming and clean-cut to be a murderer.
Ted would walk me out to my car when I left at 3 or 4 in the morning, and he'd say, Anna, be sure and lock the doors. I don't want anything to happen to you on the way home. Now, if anyone had told me at that point that I was locked up with the most dangerous man, probably in the western half of the United States, I would have said, you're crazy. The mask was absolutely perfect. That is one of the frightening things, that you can know someone for as long as I knew Ted and not know what's going on behind that smile and those clear eyes.
Ironically, the Ted Bundy case provided Rule with her first best-selling book in 1980. It is appropriately titled The Stranger Beside Me. In 1985, she was chosen by the Justice Department to help set up a national database on serial murderers.
This is for a friend of mine named Jewel.
Thank you.
I won't make you do all the rest.
Oh, well, I'm glad you bought him, though. We are not looking for the Hunchback of Notre Dame. We're not looking for a drooling, slobbering monster.
Rule says that's the main reason police still haven't been able to crack the largest unsolved serial murder case in this country, the case of the Green River Killer. From 1982 to 1984, the Green River Killer abducted and murdered 49 women. Their bodies were always dumped near Seattle's Green River, just a few miles from Ann Rule's home. Rule says serial killers are intelligent, but they are certainly not as brilliant as the Dr. Lecter character in the movie The Silence of the Lambs.
I've been in this room for 8 years now, Clarice.
In reality, she says, serial killers concentrate all their energy on killing and therefore seem smarter than they actually are. They also, as depicted in this scene, pretend to need help from someone passing by, thereby luring an unsuspecting victim into a trap.
Can I help you with that?
There is a terrible kind of synchronicity that says who is going to be a serial killer's victim. These men kill in a pattern. As the addiction grows, they need more and more of the substance that they're addicted to, which is murder. And they have to kill closer and closer together, not to get a high, but to feel normal.
Why can't people like Ted Bundy or the Green River Killer, why can't they control their lives?
Well, why can't somebody stop taking heroin? Or, crack. It's just, I think they're so filled with terror, and this makes them feel filled up and powerful for a little while.
There was one other common element among serial killers up till a few months ago. They were all male. But that changed when 33-year-old Eileen Wuornos confessed to killing 7 middle-aged men and leaving their bodies alongside highways in northern and central Florida. But usually, Rule says, female killers almost always know their victims, as in the case of Diane Downs, the woman convicted of shooting her own children and the main character in the bestseller Small Sacrifices. Rule says both Downs and Ted Bundy are sadistic sociopaths, people who feel no remorse for their crimes and no empathy for their victims' pain.
What makes somebody a sociopath? Where does it begin?
I think it begins very, very early. Under 5, certainly. Probably under 3, even under 1. The child who is abused or humiliated or rejected or abandoned or terrorized is so busy using his energies to survive that he doesn't grow a conscience. And most little kids, about 3, begin to be aware that other creatures too hurt. If you pinch your little sister, she's going to cry. If you kick the dog, he's going to yelp. But the sociopath, instead of growing a conscience, is filled with rage and frustration and fear.
According to Rule, there are some telltale signs of an adult sociopath. They love being in the limelight, they're self-centered, and they come across as inappropriately lighthearted even when discussing hideous crimes. That's why police came to suspect Diane Downs of shooting her own children.
The best thing to do with these people is to let them talk. Let them stand in the spotlight, and they will reveal themselves.
For example, in a television interview conducted shortly after the shooting, Downs appears oddly flippant for a woman who's just lost one child, seen another suffer a stroke, and the third become permanently paralyzed. She seems much more concerned about her own minor flesh wound, although police say she shot herself in the arm to mislead them.
Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. I have a steel plate on my arm. I will for a year and a half. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died.
Writing about the minds and motives of sadistic sociopaths has made Ann Rule a millionaire. And the first thing she bought was her vision of the perfect writer's retreat. A beach house so secluded you have to take a motorized tram down a 200-foot cliff to get to it.
Do you get lots of stuff wash up on the beach? Mm-hmm.
For Ann Rule's success is particularly sweet, but it's mixed with a continuing sense of horror. The killers she studies and writes about are as much a part of her life as the mountains and the water just outside her window. And she says understanding the sadistic sociopath has become much more than an interesting pursuit. It's now a quiet crusade.
You spent months with Diane Downs or Ted Bundy, whom you knew personally as well. Doesn't that start to get to you? Don't you feel you know them too well, or don't they show up in your dreams?
No, they never show up in my dreams because they come out in my conscious mind. And there's nothing more cathartic than to type all the bad feelings go out through my fingers onto the computer screen. We can learn from them. There's a reason to write about people like that because we are growing more little sociopaths and we need to know why.
That's the most frightening part of this whole report, Bob. I remember some of the stories about Ted Bundy's early years, and he did feel abandoned and abused. But are all serial killers victims of child abuse?
Ann Rule says that of all the cases that she's been able to trace back, there has been some abuse in the history.
Well, what are the warning signs then? I mean, if we're creating more of them, what do you do about it?
Well, they say generally kids who set fires, children who hurt animals or who hurt other children are showing some signs of the possibility of developing into this sociopathic personality. The problem is the parents are in the best position to spot it, and very often it's the parents who are the ones who are causing it because of the abuse. By the time they get into school or in front of other adult authority figures, they're very charismatic and they're personable and they're harder to spot there.
Chilling, but I guess important if we can detect it early enough.
They're just now getting to the point where they're able to start detecting and think about treating some of these kids past the age of 12 and 13.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, next, for car buyers, an elite research firm that sorts through all the hype, from style and reliability to whether the doors squeak.